Scout.
This program, proudly presented for your enjoyment by Ansett and the new HSV Jackaroo V6 Limited Edition.
The PM gains assurances and praise from President Clinton. Southern Victoria battling surging floodwaters, and the rising star in the Australian wine industry.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Whaley.
Good evening. Normally, an Australian Prime Minister visiting Washington is greeted courteously, perhaps invited to play a round of golf, and listened to politely when issues like trade come up. But President Bill Clinton seemed to go out of his way today to show Paul Keating his grasp of Australia's concerns over agricultural subsidies and its key role in the Asia-Pacific region. It helped that Mr. Clinton and Mr. Keating seemed to strike up a friendship. From Washington, Laurie Oakes reports.
The signing of documents connected with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, watched by 3 former presidents, put trade at the top of President Clinton's agenda even before the Australian leader's black limousine swept up the White House drive. In the Oval Office, the president said he hoped to visit Australia.
I've been jealous of every friend of mine who ever went there.
And he piled praise on Mr. Keating over the summit of leaders from APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation grouping, to be held in Seattle in November.
I want to thank the Prime Minister publicly for his leadership in helping to put that together.
During their private meeting, the two could be seen through the Oval Office windows, talking animatedly. Mr. Keating spoke later of the president's thoughtfulness and openness and said Americans had done well to find Bill Clinton as their leader. The Prime Minister was out to do a super sales job on the need for APEC to become a fully fledged economic community at the Seattle meeting. Inevitably, they also discussed the impact on Australia of subsidised US agricultural exports.
We intend to do what we can to avoid using the program in ways that undermine Australia's interests, and we're going to work very hard on that.
And on APEC, after Mr. Keating gave the President credit for the Seattle summit,
the Prime Minister has been too modest. He played a major role in convincing all these countries that their leaders should come to Seattle to be a part of this.
Mr. Keating repaid his host by giving a boost to the President's efforts to push the NAFTA treaty through Congress.
I think NAFTA equals growth, equals jobs.
I couldn't give a better answer than that.
Mr. Keating's most important aim here was to establish a strong personal relationship with President Clinton. It's very obvious that he succeeded. At another news conference after the White House talks, the Prime Minister fired a shot across the bows of the International Olympic Committee over suggestions that Beijing might be preferred to Sydney for the 2000 Games because of China's economic importance.
Geopolitics is not the business of the International Olympic Committee. Its business is selecting host cities for the Olympic Games, and that should go to the interests of the competitors and the interests of the Olympic movement in the broad.
Laurie Oakes in Washington for Nightline.
The New South Wales Corruption Commission is to investigate the handling of a private defamation case brought by State Treasurer Peter Collins. The case involves a failed defamation action brought by Collins against a health department employee. Collins lost and was ordered to pay all legal costs. He began appeal proceedings but settled the matter out of court under an agreement that saw the health department pay out $175,000 in legal expenses. Angus Rigg's family has lost its damages claim against the New South Wales Police. A Melbourne judge has found there was no evidence of negligence or lack of care by the police. The 19-year-old Victorian was left brain damaged after he tried to hang himself in a police cell. Much of southern Victoria is underwater tonight after more than 24 hours of torrential rain. The situation is expected to worsen. Already, entire communities have been evacuated and dozens of roads cut by widespread flooding that stretches from Gippsland in the east to the western outskirts of Melbourne.
As daylight diminished, the threat increased for residents in Melbourne's western suburbs. 24 hours of constant rain swelled the Maribyrnong to breaking point. By nightfall, it began inundating homes along its banks.
Pretty scary, yeah. It's pretty unusual. Never seen anything like this before.
The Anglers Tavern was one of the first to go under, but having survived 2 previous big floods, staff were prepared and managed to move furniture and stock to higher ground where business continued as usual.
Well, it's quite devastating actually, yes. But it's not just the water coming in, it's the clearances afterwards that's difficult.
More than 50 state emergency service volunteers were called in to back up local police, but there was little they could do to stop the invading water.
It's running and there's nothing we can do about it. I wouldn't recommend people sandbagging either. That could exacerbate the problem.
But as the water crept closer to homes, residents in more than 50 houses were evacuated, but the worst may be yet to come. The river is expected to peak at 4.1 metres early tomorrow morning. In towns around Gippsland in the state's southeast, hundreds of people are spending the night in temporary accommodation after being evacuated from their homes. But emergency services who plucked people to higher ground earlier today believe the crisis may have eased with the water levels beginning to drop. Areas to the north and west of Melbourne were also awash after the deluge. The city itself has already this month received twice its average September rainfall. But the Weather Bureau predicts a brighter outlook for tomorrow. Natasha Johnson for Nightline.
A man who killed 3 people in an execution-style murder has been found guilty in the Victorian Supreme Court. 36-year-old Ashley Coulston shot dead 27-year-old Peter Dempsey, his sister-in-law Anne Smurden and Karen Henstridge, both aged 22. Coulston broke into a house in the Melbourne suburb of Burwood, tied up the 3 victims, then shot them through the head with a sawn-off rifle. 5 weeks later, he shot and wounded a security guard during a hold-up. Coulston is expected to be sentenced next week. In Perth, thieves have stolen a consignment of lethal drugs from a veterinary surgery. Their value is only a few $100s, but police warn some of them could kill a human within seconds. Police have urged the thieves to hand the drugs in. In Adelaide, spy cameras are being used to fight vandals damaging buses and trains. So far, 14 youths have been caught in the act by hidden video cameras, the first to be installed on public transport in Australia. Graffiti and vandalism cost South Australia $1 million a year. The migration issue raised its head again today, almost leading to blows between 2 prominent politicians. The fiery argument over our future racial mix erupted in Darwin during the opening conference on migration in the Asian Pacific region.
The occasion was an important national conference on the future of migration to Australia, the Northern Territory's Chief Minister arguing passionately for a massive increase.
Migration can only strengthen our bonds of friendship with neighbouring countries.
Later, Mr Perrin was elaborating on his theme when he was suddenly interrupted.
Yeah, I think you're living in a different world. No, I don't think so. I mean, for my part, I must say I don't think I've ever heard so much palpable nonsense spoken in such well-modulated terms. Yeah. I think he's wrong in just about every score.
Mr Campbell's the federal ALP member for Kalgoorlie. He's also a highly controversial member of the Caucus Migration Committee and not backward in coming forward on the most sensitive issues.
Australia overwhelmingly wants lower immigration, an end to multiculturalism and a stop to Asianisation.
Anyone who thinks that Australia is going to remain the vast sort of open space that it is today, in a world that's going to have a population of 8 billion by the year 2025, is kidding themselves.
Things that my migrants don't like most is new migrants. They hate migrants taking their kids' jobs away from them.
And what a load of nonsense to presume that the wave of migrants from Europe in the early 50s, that somehow that was bad for Australia. I mean, it made Australia what it is today, and the subsequent waves of immigration can make it an even better country than it is today.
Mr Perrin believes Australia can support hundreds of thousands of migrants each year, many of them coming from Asia. The federal government's current policy, though, is to keep the numbers well below 70,000. Peter Harvey reporting for Nightline.
After the break, Arafat and Rabin maintain the momentum of peace, and Australian truckies on the front line in Bosnia.
Tomorrow, amidst controversy and speculation, the court government delivers its first state budget, and Perth's news station will be there.
Live from Parliament House, National 9 News anchors Liam Bartlett and Tina Altieri interview the key players and present special background reports that tell you where your money is being spent and how much more you'll have to pay.
Won't be a horror budget, it will be a fair budget.
Budget 93, tomorrow at 6 on National 9 News.
It begins with the gentle turn of a key and becomes a passion for performance, combining superior design and exceptional engineering with the prestige of a limited edition four-wheel drive. HSV Jackaroo V6, a very special vehicle.
There's always time to enjoy the taste of real roast coffee, now that Robert Timms has it in the bag. Try the new South American blends.
In an increasingly complex business world, whose advice can you trust? Certified practicing accountants must constantly update their knowledge. Informed business advice, that's how you'll profit from our experience.
The Gaza Strip has been sealed off by Israeli troops and will stay closed during Jewish New Year celebrations following rioting which left a Palestinian dead and 4 Israeli soldiers wounded. A wave of unrest continues in the occupied territories despite yesterday's historic signing of a peace accord between Israel and the PLO. Meanwhile, Jordan and Israel have signed an agreement setting out an agenda for a peace treaty. And Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin has arrived home after his stop-off in Morocco for talks with King Hassan.
The Israeli army band played peace songs as Israel's peacemakers strode down the red carpet at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport. They'd been gone only 2.5 days, 60 hours which transformed their country and their region. It was a well-attended reception considering it was 5 in the morning, but 2 high-ranking right-wing members of parliament stayed away. They said they didn't want to touch the hand which had shaken the hand of Yasser Arafat. Asked how he felt at that moment, Prime Minister Rabin said, "I won't talk about my feelings. I made a decision. The PLO is our partner." Israelis are supporting that decision in increasing numbers. A poll released this morning shows 61% in favor, up 4% from only 5 days ago. It was almost certainly the impact of the ceremony itself.
It was a historic event, and it was quite moving. Now we have to continue to work.
A few hours earlier, there was another arrival. 2 Israeli soldiers seriously wounded by terrorists were carried into a Jerusalem hospital. They'd been shot near the West Bank town of Hebron. One of the gunmen, believed to be a member of the Muslim fundamentalist group Hamas, was killed.
PLO leader Yasser Arafat has also left Washington, returning to a rousing welcome in Tunis. He told the crowd that Palestinians have an important friend in the White House. Earlier, Arafat had charmed Washington heavyweights in the hope of gaining vital financial support.
In a town where only a tourist would ask for an autograph, big league politicians were asking this out-of-towner for his. In a town where powerful people know their minds, opinions changed overnight.
But he's a very engaging personality, there's no question about that. He spoke in excellent English.
And in a town where handshaking is as natural as breathing, Yasser Arafat found that once his enemy had shaken his hand, there was no end to those lined up to do the same. Jaded Washington welcomed Arafat with curiosity and awe. Congressmen were gushing like schoolboys.
I was sweating. I mean, I've met the Queen, it didn't bother me, you know?
Did you shake his hand?
I shook his hand.
The normally tough audience at the National Press Club found that a man journalists have forever described as a terrorist could charm them into a laugh.
Now that you have signed the peace treaty with Israel, who do you now consider your foe?
You?
Do you know why? He's squeezing me too much with his questions.
Washington embraced Arafat because he turned out to be just as skilled a politician as you'll find anywhere in this town. It was a case of, we have met the enemy, and he acts just like one of us. PLO officials at first were taken aback by all the attention, but they and Arafat quickly rose to the occasion. It was essential because there was a serious purpose behind the intense politicking. The PLO and peace will not succeed without Washington's backing. And as Arafat flew back to the Middle East, that much at least seemed in the bag.
2 people have died in the crash of a Lufthansa Airbus as it came into land at Warsaw Airport. In heavy rain, the plane, which was carrying 70 people, ran off the runway, hit an earth barrier and burst into flames. A crew member and a passenger were killed and more than 50 others injured. There was another accident with a big jet, this time in Tahiti, but it was more a slip-up than a tragedy. The Air France Jumbo, with 270 people on board, overshot the runway and ended up in the water. No one was seriously hurt. Foreign Affairs is warning Australians planning trips to Florida to be particularly cautious following the murder of another tourist. A 34-year-old Englishman was killed and his wife wounded by 2 gunmen who tried to rob them at a highway rest stop. His wife managed to get to a phone to call for help.
This is a 911. What is the emergency? Yeah, I want an ambulance. My husband's dying. We've been shot with a banister arrest area on Interstate 10. Okay, we've sent him for an ambulance. He's dying. He's really dying. All right. Please hurry. Okay, we got him en route, ma'am. We've been shot.
9 foreign tourists have been murdered in Florida in the past 12 months. Another ceasefire has been agreed in Bosnia, this one between the Muslims and the Croats. But few truces have held in the past, and already there are reports of fresh outbreaks of fighting. In the midst of the conflict, 8 Australian truck drivers have taken on the dangerous task of carrying supplies for the relief organisation CARE to embattled towns and villages. This is just the start of a heavy Australian presence in the region. CARE hopes to bring in more than 40 drivers in the next 2 months.
It's not a job you'd want every day, putting your life on the line to make sure people get urgently needed food and medicine. But these Aussie truck drivers have volunteered to spend the next 4 months dodging mortar and sniper fire to do just that. They've nicknamed this stretch of road the Highway to Hell. It runs from their base at Metkovic in Croatia's Dalmatian coast to Tuzla in East Bosnia.
I want to get from here to there in one piece.
Those kids are going to love that medical supplies, mate. When they get that through to them, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
On a good run, it can take up to 3 days, but most convoys never get through. Stopped at military checkpoints, their cargo confiscated by militia or held hostage by frightened townspeople, hoping the presence of the trucks will deter further attacks. This convoy was lucky, the biggest to make the journey to Tuzla in several weeks. With winter approaching, thousands of civilians blockaded in their towns and villages will starve or freeze to death. If the funding holds out, these drivers will make the journey to Tuzla and other towns again and again, a slim lifeline to the world for a people ravaged by war. Chris Castellari for Nightline.
The droughts that have ravaged much of Africa have produced unrivaled suffering in many countries. As well as the human misery, the droughts have also severely hit the endangered wildlife of Africa. But a threat to the elephants of Zimbabwe has led to an extraordinary rescue mission.
Such is the overpopulation of elephants in this Zimbabwe National Park that some 500 had to be culled humanely every year. The reserve simply couldn't sustain them. But now these giants of the wild are being offered a new life in a new country. For the first time ever, conservationists are translocating entire family groups. It's never been done before. After being darted, the tranquilized beasts are carefully manhandled into specially converted trucks for the long journey ahead. Throughout the night, vets keep their passengers well watered. By dawn, Zimbabwe's latest exports are sniffing the air in their new home, Madikwe Game Reserve in the independent South African state of Bophuthatswana. It's part of an ambitious program to restock this new park.
Operation Phoenix, which will be one of the world's largest translocation exercises of wild animals ever undertaken in the world. And we're going to be, over 4 years, bringing in 10,000 animals to restock this, this new game reserve of ours.
By the end of the year, 500 Zimbabwe elephants will have been saved from slaughter.
In a moment, the Australian agenda tonight, Victoria's wine industry, catching up with the big ones.
Sunday night.
Put your seatbelts on!
Prepare yourself.
Hang on, it's very, very bad!
For the action premiere. Bruce Willis is The Last Boy Scout. Premieres Sunday, 8:30 on 9.
See, Les is in town.
Yeah, he's taking a gander at that new Discovery. Don't think you'll like it. It's got air conditioning, automatic, power steering. Supposed to be real comfy. He'll be back soon. He'll be back soon. He'll be back in a moment.
Country bakers, taste by a country mile. The taste that's sure to make them smile. With goodness you can taste, it must be country bacon. The best taste by a country mile.
Hey Max, what have you got for us at Bridgestone Tyre Centres this month?
I've got a great deal for you, Brocky. Buy 4 new Bridgestone Super Cats or Steel Cats and we'll give you $30 worth of free petrol from BP.
That's a great deal, Max.
And it's only available at your Bridgestone Tyre Centre.
In an increasingly complex business world, whose advice can you trust? Certified practicing accountants must constantly update their knowledge. Informed business advice, that's how you'll profit from our experience.
Lego's Italiano cooking sauces are big bottle, big flavor. Big recipe ideas, big chunky sauces, garden vegetable, napoletana, tomato, onion and garlic. Piccante. Add to meat or pour over pasta and presto. Italiano autentico taste. Big hits. Scusa, I said big. Bravo.
The days are long gone when the Hunter and Barossa valleys dominated Australia's wine industry. Now there are a dozen other wine-growing regions around the country that are not only winning laurels of their own, but are actually being prized above some of the traditional areas for both their quality and their interest value. Overseas sales of Australian wine are increasing at a rate of around 35% a year and are expected to top the $1 billion mark by the end of the century. But to meet that target, we need to plant more vines. And nowhere is that planting taking place more eagerly than in Victoria. In tonight's Australian agenda, Jason Cameron looks at how those vineyards are preparing to reap the twin benefits of export success and tourism.
Travel the wine roads of Victoria and you'll find plenty of the industry's biggest names. Seppelt at Great Western, Brown Brothers in the Ovens Valley. It's a little-known fact that Victoria produces 40% of all the grapes grown in Australia. But most of those grapes lose their regional identity the moment they cross the border to be blended into high-quality brands in South Australia and New South Wales. Australia's largest exporter of white wine also has a Victorian address. Lindeman's Caradoc in the Murray Valley crushes 1,500 tonnes of grapes a day and has storage capacity for 65 million litres.
157 million bottles of Australian wine sold around the world, we believe becomes 157 million conversations about Australia, about Victoria, about the wine regions.
But increasingly it's the smaller producers that are making their mark. Back in the 60s, there were just 20 wineries in Victoria. Today there are 230. Father and son, Jim and Michael Zitzlaff, established Oak Ridge Estate at Seville in the Yarra Valley 19 years ago. As a measure of their quality, they've just won the Wine Press Club trophy for the best Victorian dry red at the Royal Melbourne Show.
It helps, it does help, it really does. It's a fairly competitive marketplace, and to be able to prove to people that yes, we do make excellent wines, especially Victorian red wine, which is really what we're aiming at. Yeah, it's nice, it's reassuring.
A former building contractor, Jim recalls the days he used to do battle with Norm Gallagher's Builders Labourers Federation. Now in semi-retirement, he distinctly remembers the day his life changed direction.
I think I squarely put the blame on a fellow vigneron from Seville Estate who gave me 12 vines to plant. And he says, if you don't make wine, just eat it.
Those 12 vines became 12,000, and Oak Ridge now produces around 3,000 cases a year. Too big to be a boutique winery, yet too small to be a major player.
It's a daunting task when you realise that everyone's got to be put in by hand, and you plant them, and you grow them, you spray them, and you train them, you trellis them, and prune them, and eventually after 3 years they give you some fruit.
Determined to stay a family business, Jim and Michael are concentrating on quality and keeping their product affordable. Prestigious industry awards also have a very welcome side effect: tourism. 500,000 tourists a year are discovering the pleasures of visiting Victoria's vineyards, which is perhaps not surprising considering most wineries in the state are less than 90 minutes out of Melbourne.
This one's $7 a bottle.
De Bortoli's has rapidly become the showpiece of the Yarra Valley. Set in landscape surroundings, its polish and professionalism extends from the cellar door to its Italian restaurant overlooking the valley. Not far away, the world's largest sparkling wine producer, Moet and Chandon of France, has established its Australian operation, Domaine Chandon. And everywhere there are new plantings. It's estimated that up to 40% of all the new vineyards in Australia will be in Victoria.
We have the best of all worlds because we have a certain amount of coolness, but just enough heat to get those grapes fully ripened with good flavour.
If present projections for growth in wine exports are realised, wine could soon be the equal of our cotton and sugar industries. Victoria, with its cool climate, rich soil and winemaking traditions, could be on the verge of a rich harvest. Jason Cameron for Nightline.
And still to come tonight, the latest finance and weather. And in sport, a 12-year ban for a young Aussie rules player.
On A Current Affair, is the age of chivalry dead?
A lot of steps.
We put Australians to the test with surprising results.
She's pregnant, so what?
Do you help or turn your back?
People that have their schedules, and that's more important than what's going on around them.
Tomorrow, 6:30.
All those credit cards, do they really suit you or just your bank? At ANZ, you're sure to find a card you'll want to take home with you. We've got a card with a long interest-free period and a card with low interest if you want to spread your repayments. In fact, all sorts of credit cards for all sorts of people. So when you choose an ANZ card,
That one.
it'll do exactly what you tell it
Good
to.
boy.
Simple, isn't it?
Sit.
Well, it is when you bank with ANZ.
The Nile. No river in the world is longer. We're here for Energizer to prove no battery lasts longer. These rowers are all using ordinary carbon zinc batteries, except one. He's powered by Energizer. You need a lot of energy to row a river this long, and that's exactly what Energizer's got. International tests confirm that no battery lasts longer than Energizer.
He's still going. Oi!
The dream, to create an engine that achieves optimum power and superior fuel economy. The challenge, to test our theory in the grueling research laboratory of Formula One racing. The result? Honda VTEC. A range of revolutionary engines that achieves the perfect balance between fuel economy, performance, and the environment for every driver. Honda VTEC. Experience the future of motoring today.
The worldwide specialists, PCU Computers, present the future-proof multimedia 486 for under $26 per week, complete with software and a bonus color printer. PCU, remember the name. It's going to mean a lot to you in the future. It's spring cleaning time again, but more and more West Australians are discovering how Aztec Cleaning can clean away that winter mould. With their simple spray technique, Aztec Cleaning works inside or out on most surfaces, including those messy eaves and patio areas. Phone Aztec Cleaning 322-2532.
To sport now, and Adelaide's Wayne Wiedemann is free to play in Saturday's final against Essendon. Wiedemann was cleared tonight of unduly rough play in last weekend's match against Carlton. A 16-year-old Victorian has been banned from playing football for 12 years after a kicking incident during a junior Aussie Rules Grand Final. The Aberfeldy player was involved in this scuffle in the final minutes of the game against Tullamarine. His opponent was knocked unconscious and was later admitted to a spinal unit for treatment. The head coach of China's women athletes has angrily denied that his two record-breaking distance runners had used performance-enhancing drugs. At the Chinese National Championships, Wang Junxia shattered the 10,000 metres world record by 42 seconds, then twice bettered the world mark in the 3,000 metres. Another runner, Qiu Yunxia, set a new record in the 1,500. Their coach says their success came from high-altitude training and a health tonic made from turtle and honey. Finance news, and the Australian share market fell again today, down another 9 points. In Tokyo, the market is closed for a national holiday, but in London tonight, the FT100 is 16 points down in morning trading. Gold has risen $3.40 an ounce to $346.05 US, and in European trading tonight, the Australian dollar is buying 64.7 US cents, 1.03 Deutschmarks, 68 yen and 41p. The national weather, and there are low pressure areas near the Bight, and to the south of the continent, there's a high below Adelaide. The forecast's fine in Darwin and Brisbane, fine as well in Sydney, mostly fine in Canberra, drizzle clearing in Melbourne, a shower or two in Hobart, cloudy periods for Adelaide, and a few showers in Perth. To finish tonight, Michael Jackson's quick step with the Red Army in Moscow. Jackson is continuing his world tour despite being dogged by allegations of child abuse, which may even end up in court in coming weeks. His march with the troops was for a film to promote his current world tour. Good night.
This program, proudly presented for your enjoyment by Ansett and the new HSV Jackaroo V6 Limited Edition.
Behind the iron smile,
None of them would call me sweetheart.
the lady who could be PM.
Oh, I don't see any problem with that. Is there anyone Bronwyn Bishop is afraid of?
And the talkback tyrants winning listeners with outrage.
Get off my back, you mug.
60 Minutes, 7:30 Sunday.